Welcome back to Section 4 Fans, a podcast with real fans, real takes. March Madness has delivered in a pretty big way, so we're going to start with recapping some of the chaos from the first weekend, and then we'll look ahead to the Sweet 16 matchups and to kind of what should we look into, what should we expect as the tournament really heats up here and this upcoming weekend. So let's get into it. Kind of just initial reactions before we dive into, maybe specific upsets or matchups from this past first weekend. Kind of just initial reactions of the first weekend of this year's March Madness.
Honestly, it is. I think it's leaves you speechless watching the games because it's a once in a lifetime thing for these players to play in. I know there's players that are have the opportunity to play in it multiple years just because of the teams they play for, the teams they transfer to, etc., conferences they play in. But as a fan watching it, it brings the fans so much joy just to be able to not only learn so much about the programs, it brings in so much joy to a fan watching this sporting event. I honestly, I could personally, I think it's the greatest sporting event tournament in the world. Personally,
Yeah,
that's
there's really
I
nothing
think
quite like March. I mean, it is truly
it's truly
amazing.
amazing.
The moments, and not even talking about like the upsets or like the buzzer beaters, but even just more of like the moments that kind of make you appreciate the game, and
Hmm.
especially from a college athlete point of view. We've seen in some of the games where the teams have been getting blown out by amounts where it's clear they're not coming back from. And
Oh no.
it's always nice to see that they kind of unload their bench, with more than, 10 seconds left. They give some of the guys that really haven't gotten many minutes and, are upperclassmen, this is probably going to be their last time ever being on a
Hmm.
sports team in a moment like this. And for those guys to be able to go out there and, maybe if it's only like 3 minutes,
Yeah.
and if they can hit a shot in March, like that's something you're going to remember
That
the rest of your
LIU
life,
player.
and no one's going to be able to say differently that no one's going to have that experience that they made a shot in one of these big time arenas in March Madness. Sure, you were getting blown out, but at the end of the day, that's an experience that people won't be able to take away from you.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think one of the most interesting things is about March Madness is that no lead is really safe.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen that here and there. We've seen, kind of just after that statement, what stands out to me is VCU's comeback. That was, that looked almost an amountable comeback to come back from 19 points down to the Tar Heels, and they were able to get it done in overtime. But that was just a complete collapse from the Tar Heels standpoint, and that coach is definitely on thin ice right now.
Well, and then you also have Kansas almost near comeback against St. John's the other night. Um High Point almost came back as or almost beat Arkansas as well. It felt like Arkansas kind of was running away with it early on, but High Point was there the entire game.
Yeah,
And
definitely. That
then Duke, even Duke, you're looking at the game, you're like, are they gonna just
Polo,
lose
Virginia.
for? Yeah, exactly. Are they gonna
Yeah.
lose the first round? Are they gonna wake up? And personally, I think Duke really needed that game, especially at the start of the tournament. Uh, Pretty much a wake up call for the players.
Yeah, I
Younger
mean they
squad.
they still looked a bit rough against TCU.
Hmm.
Personally, hopefully they can clean that up this week. Just kind of get reset their minds in a way because this is a very tough matchup for them in
Hmm.
the Sweet 16 here. But just wanted to go back to the St. John's game. I thought it was pretty wild that the player that hit the game-winning shot, that was his only points of the game, and that was the first time ever that in the tournament a player's only points were a true buzzer beater. So it just shows you that, not even we've seen a lot of the stars carry their teams. Acuff has been kind of the standout guy
Yeah, he
in
leads March Madness in
conference
points.
tournaments and into March Madness. But on multiple of the teams, you see other guys stepping up in pretty big moments there, which is always nice to see.
Yeah, no, Acuff is an incredible player. I saw a report saying that they have him slotted at second overall, right behind AJ out of BYU, in
Yeah,
the
I mean
draft.
he's definitely been climbing up the draft boards. If we could just touch on Acuff right here in his 5 postseason games, so that's counting the SEC tournament and the 2 games so far in March. He's put up 37, 24, 30, 24, 36. He's been averaging 30 points a game, 7 assists. He's been shooting 45 from the field and 48% from three.
Yeah, it's nuts.
He has been unbelievable. Definitely been he's kind of put Arkansas
He
a bit
did
on
just
his
sign.
shoulders, and he's been able to do quite well with that. And if I'm an NBA scout looking at the draft class, obviously there's the 4 guys that have kind of been the front runners all year in AJ DeBonsa, Cam Boozer, Caleb Wilson, and Darren Peterson. Obviously, they all kind of have their, you know, slight cons, you may say. Caleb Wilson's out for the year. He got thumb surgery. Darren Peterson has kind of been, something's up with him. No one really knows why he's been sitting out in those
They
moments.
supposedly there's reports where he got sick or something in preseason, and it's
Yep.
just it it he like it was pretty much he just overworked his body,
Yeah, and that could be a
and
case. It could be nothing
and
about
like
his
his
work
full
ethic.
this was a report, if I'm remembering correctly, he it was some diagnosis where his full body cramped and he couldn't move, like his full body tensed up and cramped, and supposedly like every time he's had that kind of feeling, it's he's pulled himself out because of that, because he's scared it's going to happen again.
Yeah.
And people were saying like people that played high school sports said they had the full body cramp and they had to quit sports because mentally they couldn't go back into it because they didn't want to experience it again.
Yeah, that's definitely probably a scary
I don't know if that's true.
moment.
I
Yeah, I
saw
mean,
that. I saw someone
if
say
that's
that.
what's been the case, that's definitely a scary moment for any young athlete to endure. But yeah, there's been kind of questions regarding why he's been out, and it's not like he's been sitting out against some of the weaker matchups. It's been some odd instances where he either hasn't played or hasn't played the second half. So hopefully nothing's wrong with him and he can have a good long career in the NBA. But obviously there's that noise around him entering the draft. Cam Boozer, I think, has been the most consistent player all season long. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe AJ DeBonsa he was the leading scorer of the NCAA this year, like
Hmm.
regular season.
Yep.
But I think Darius Acuff is really making a name for himself here. I'd really like to see him break into that top 4 and not sit out at 5. I think he can make a push for top 3.
Well, is he gonna go? Is
I
the
think
real
he could.
question.
I think kind of looking
Well, NIL, you never
physically,
know anymore.
yeah, but looking just physically, I think he has the most NBA player ready build in terms of just like the way he looks. He's got a lot of muscle on him. He's got that NBA player build
The only
already.
thing is
Whereas
defensively.
some of the other guys, they're trying to grow into their body still, and it feels like Acuff has already made leaps and bounds in that department. So I think that could be a kind of a good level to already enter the NBA draft with. But
That's
who knows
where
if Arkansas could go on a run here? I think he could definitely squeeze into the top 3.
against Arizona, I think it'll be interesting how he matches up defensively. Scheme wise, especially who he matches up on defense. Is he gonna get? Because watching high points point guard, obviously elite scorer all year for High Point. High Point loves shoots the ball a ton. Their their goal is not to play good defense. Their goal is to score. If you're going to score 90 points, we're going to score 102, for
Yeah.
example. And it seemed like he almost blew past Acuff a little bit too much for people saying top five pick. Obviously, Acuff is a true freshman. He's what, 18, 19 years
Yeah, I
old.
mean all the
And
top 5 projected are all true freshmen.
yeah, exactly. And I'm not trying to bash on him because I can't play defense and I can't even shoot a basketball probably. And but I think it'll be fun to watch how
How he is
they
against
yeah, how they use
Arizona.
him
Yeah.
defensively in Arizona, and does Arizona exploit him defensively? Does he get more help? Uh
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that matchup goes into play here this weekend. Was there anything else from this past weekend you wanted to touch on before we move
mm,
on to the good old Sweet 16?
Disappointment of Wisconsin. Carolina probably gonna part ways with their coach. South Florida's coach moved up in the ranks. Kind of.
I believe he went to Providence, if I'm not
Yes, he went to
mistaken. Yep.
Providence. Sienna's coach went to Syracuse.
Which is a huge
Huge step.
because he played at Syracuse. I believe he was on that team with Mello, OG Mello, not LaMelo Ball. And now potentially he's going to be coaching Carmelo's son. So
I'd
that
assume
could
his
be
son
that.
would stay just
Yeah, I
because of
think
the
he's going to say
relationship
he did.
there.
Well, he also didn't really get enough opportunity. Kind of like he got some playing time, but it almost is like okay, he got that experience and you look at a guy like Bryce James, who is on definitely like the best team in college basketball at this point in time, and he redshirted because he didn't want to waste a year. Yes, but he also knew that like that's probably the best program to grow into and to be the player that he wants to be as well. So I think Carmelo's son, I think his name's Kyan. I think he's going to have the same thought process there. Obviously, sons coming from some NBA greats right there. I think they're going to have the knowledge and the kind of the willpower to want to be the best player they can be before entering the draft. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Some other headlines that I'm just reading about. It looks like St. Mary's coach is leaving, going to Arizona State. Utah State's coach is going to Cincinnati. It's another one.
That'll be an interesting jump for him going from the Mountain West to the Big 12 for sure. Big 12 has
Yeah.
been tough as of late in basketball.
Trying to see if there's been any other big coaching moves, especially out of the March Madness. People are talking about as well Kansas head
Bill
coach
Self.
possibly retiring
Yeah,
after
I
this
think he
year.
said something about like health concerns. He's going to take the time away and think about it. That'll be really interesting if he decides to retire
Oh,
and now that Kansas spot is open up.
McDermott, Creighton
Yeah,
also has a spot
McDermott.
open. McDermott
Yeah,
is retiring. Uh,
maybe Creighton gets a good young coach in there, and they can kind
uh,
of reset that program and get back into March.
this is a discussion for another time, but I feel like a big question to ask is the NIL pushing all these old school. I don't even know if I'd say old school, just
Older
vet,
generation coaches.
veteran. Let's be a little bit nicer here. I
No,
just
I mean
realized
they
that
are.
there's
I mean most
I
of those
know
guys have been coaching
veteran
for 20 plus
coaches,
years at
veteran
the same
coaches,
school. Like
veteran coach. Yeah, oh no, 100%. And I think that's what's amazing about
I
college
mean,
sports is that like these guys coach at these schools for 20 plus years,
Coach
create a
K. I
legacy.
mean, Tom Izzo.
Exactly.
Like it's it's insane how long they've lasted at these schools, and that just
Hmm.
goes to show you how well they are at not only being a coach but also building a program. Um, so that's pretty incredible. But yeah, I think the NIL does play a factor. I think it just adds extra outside noise in a way that I
Hmm.
think the older generation of coaches just simply can't like don't want to say handle, but like handle in a way. I think they just want to stick to building a program, coaching the players. I don't think they want to deal with all this money business and players, bitching because they're getting 2 million NIL, but they're not getting the minutes to back that up.
Hmm.
So I think it's just a lot of that. But I mean, yeah, it's a problem all throughout college sports. Obviously, mostly seen in football and basketball. But I think that's why we've seen the kind of the older generation work their way out, and the newer generation has been coming in, stepping up. I think there's been quite a few very young coaches across basketball and football as well that have been making waves, and I think this is an interesting time where we're seeing kind of guys that not only we grew up with, but you know even you could even say our parents grew up with these guys, maybe not coaching at that same school, but they knew these guys to some extent in a way.
Hmm.
Like I guarantee if you ask your parents or whatnot, they know who Coach K is. They at
Oh
least
yeah.
resonate him with Duke in a way and things like that. So yeah, I think the new wave of young coaches is going to be interesting, and it will maybe we'll see some shake-ups in terms of the powerhouses.
Yeah, no. Two things I want to say before we move on to this upcoming weekend. Um, I think college coaches are on a much shorter leash now with the whole NIL. They are expected to produce results. And then secondly, um, heartbreaker for Vandy, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely
What a what
brutal. I
a
really
what a
like that
game
squad.
that was between Vandy and Nebraska. There was too many close games where it was hard to watch them all at once. You had to keep flipping back and forth.
Fly
Um,
box.
Overall, although there wasn't that many upsets or Cinderella stories that people want to talk about, besides like Texas and High Point, I guess. Um, I think overall one of the better weekends of March Madness
Yeah,
basketball.
I loved it. There was a lot of favorites that won, not as many, deep Cinderella runs as what we've seen. But I think we've seen some very good storylines, as in Iowa and Nebraska, making, very
Hmm.
deep runs for the first time in program history or for the first time in quite some time. So I think seeing
And they match up.
some stories like that is interesting. Yeah, I mean, we can kind of go into the matchups for the Sweet 16 here. Um, the Big Ten's definitely been making waves, not only in
For the
football as of late, but it seems
first
like
time ever.
they've been making waves in the basketball area as well. Big Ten's been putting up a fight lately.
Used to be
However,
bet against the Big Ten always.
I do want to note the Big Ten has not won a basketball championship since 2000, so it's been 26 years.
Since 2000.
Michigan State.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, Michigan
Because
State. But like
02 was Maryland, but they were not in the Big Ten
their
at that point. Yep.
ACC. Um, yeah, I mean, like you see the Big Ten teams in the Final Four and the finals
They can
quite
never
a
get over
bit.
that hump.
They can't get over the hump. Michigan a few
Wisconsin.
times, Wisconsin, Michigan State obviously again.
Yeah.
Um,
Maybe this is the year. I know they got the most teams in the field at this point in time, but
yeah,
I
but
mean,
I think the Big 12 is just
oh,
so good.
The Big 12 is just loaded in terms of talent. But I do once speaking of talent, I want to get into the Duke St. John's matchup here. Uh, love me some Rick Pitino, man. He's easily one of the best coaches, but sticking to kind of what this matchup's going to look like. Obviously, Duke is a top 10 offense in the country, uh, and
St. John's values their defense.
yeah, St. John's is very good on defense. They're a top 10 defense in the country. Duke is also a top 5 defense in pick and rolls. So that'll be interesting to see how that matches up against St. John's. I don't believe they're very pick and roll heavy. I know in a couple other matchups there are some teams that do love a good pick and roll. However, St. John's does force turnovers on about 20% of opponents' possessions, and we did see Duke struggle in that Siena game. Although Cam Boozer was able to come back in that second half and kind of lead Duke to the win. Early on in the first half, we did see him with some very questionable turnovers there. So I think if St. John's can capitalize defensively on some of those mistakes, I think that is going to be probably one of the key points to a St. John's victory.
I think one of the big things for Duke is fast break points, how quickly they can get the ball up the floor. I think that's where Kansas almost found some of the most success for them was finding quick outlets, getting down the floor quick, and just a high tempo offense.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
and it's kind of like that with St. John's as well. They're uh, they're about top 25 in most fast break points per game in the country. And the thing with Duke is they got one of the best transition defenses in the country too, so it's really going to match up well on that part too. Obviously, we've seen St. John's; they like to apply pressure both offensively and defensively, and I think if Duke could get some stars healthy, I know they've had a couple out this past week, and I think that could also affect maybe St. John's game plan.
Ultimately, what this game's going to come down to is who can handle the pressure more. Um, St. John's hasn't been in the Sweet 16 since 1996 or 98,
I think,
something along
yeah,
those lines. And then you have Duke led by their freshmen, their true
very very
freshmen,
young squad. St. John's is a very old squad as well.
and they are the number one overall team in the nation going into the tournament. How are they going to handle the pressure in the Sweet 16 matchup against St. John's?
I'm very
Whoever
interested in this matchup.
whoever starts the game hot is going to end up being the winner of this game. I don't think whoever starts, like, let's say 5, 10 minutes in, who's ever leading is going to lead the rest of the game. Personally, I think there's so much pressure on this game alone with everything that comes at stake with the loss ending your season and also just the pressure of being a true freshman leading the team, and also the whole school is looking at you because you haven't been in the Sweet 16 since 1996 or 98.
Yeah, and Rick Pitino wants his lick back on Christian Laettner and the Duke squad. So, yeah, I think this is going to be one of the matchups I'm definitely tuning into 100% this weekend. Next matchup we got is going to be a very good one, I think, is Michigan State, UConn.
Michigan State by 10.
UConn is top 30 in offense and number 11 in defense, and Michigan State is a top 22 offense and number 13 ranked in defense. So, not as dominant on either side, offense or defense, compared to, the previous matchup, as we mentioned here. The kind of the thing that stands out to me is with this Michigan State squad is the way they play through Jeremy Fears. He's very much a facilitator for them, and I think if UConn doesn't allow him to get the ball, that's going to definitely cause a. It's gonna make Michigan State tweak their game plan for sure.
It's going to mess up
the
their tempo. He
the the
he can he
problem
controls the game, and
the problem is though almost every time a Michigan State player gets the ball, they're gonna find Jeremy Fears. It really doesn't matter. They're looking to get it to him so then he can facilitate elsewhere. They also got the best defensive rebounding in the country, Michigan State. So that's also
yeah,
probably a very good stat you want to have in moments like this.
not allowing those second chance points is huge in March Madness. You see these teams that not only second chance points, but they get a third try and all of a sudden it gets kicked out to the 3 point line and they make a three after two missed layups.
Yeah. Uh, Kind of looking at some of their games, they obviously kind of blew out the competition. The competition in the first weekend, Michigan State is one of the best offensive transitions in the country. UConn's got one of the best transition defenses in the country. Kind of looking at that and the fact that they're looking for Jeremy Fears, the way they rebound defensively, and Michigan State also kind of does a great job in rim protecting. They don't allow a lot of shots kind of in that rim area. They force them outwards. So I think ultimately for me, this matchup is going to come down to Michigan State's fast break points. I think if Michigan State can find a way to beat UConn, I think their best shot is going to be doing it in transition.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that at all. I just think Michigan State's a much better team, just all around. I think they're just better overall. I think they're more prepared for the tournament than UConn. Uh, the only thing is that UConn did get through UCLA to play Michigan State. Michigan State got through Louisville and unhealthy Louisville squad, and then also a North Dakota State team that
Yeah, I mean Michigan State killed them by a lot, both matchups. UConn did
Yeah.
struggle a bit. I believe they were matched up against Furman in the first round.
Yeah.
And they also struggled a little bit as well early on against UCLA there. So, I think really UConn can't afford to come out slow. I think they need to come out hot, and we'll kind of see how that matchup shakes up. But I think the one that Middle America is talking about the most is the Battle of the Corn, Nebraska, Iowa. This is going to be a
Every
very anticipated
Midwestern's
matchup.
dream.
Iowa hasn't been back to uh, the Sweet 16 since 1999, and that was Iowa. And Nebraska has never been to the Sweet 16, as we've seen this past weekend.
They
They got
didn't
their first
win every
ever
tournament win.
March Madness win. So this is going to be a very good matchup here. They being that they're both in the Big Ten, they've played each other twice this year. So kind of the thing that I noted going back to their two previous meetings this season was in the first matchup, both teams had 12 turnovers and the game went to Iowa. And then in the second game, Iowa had 7 more turnovers than Nebraska, and Nebraska came out with a W there. So I think, ultimately, like every game, turnovers are going to cost you. And I think if Nebraska can just allow, they already allow, they got top 6 defense in the country. They're very good at protecting the rim. They don't allow a lot of shots by the rim. I think if they could keep that going, and they also got that big white, or not the big white, but the shooter. I forget his name, but he was pulling up from 3 both those games, lights out, damn
He
near.
took he has all the all-time school record, doesn't he know?
I would assume so,
Is that
looking
the
at the
guy
way
that
he
you're talking
shot.
about?
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting. Iowa, they do have the slowest paced team.
I mean, yeah, you could just tell by watching Iowa.
And, we've seen how that's played out for 2 games for them. They've been able to squeeze out a win in both. So it will just be interesting to see how this matchup happens here.
Yeah, obviously Nebraska needs to speed up Iowa in order to, I think, win this game.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think that will ultimately cause more turnovers, which will hopefully play into Nebraska's favor.
yeah, and Nebraska will shoot from anywhere. If they're on that night for shooting, they have a good chance of winning. If they can't shoot the ball that night, it's pretty self-explanatory.
Yep.
They don't have a chance of winning that game. Uh, that's all it's going to come down to, really. I think is Nebraska's shooting.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more there. Kind of speaking at shooting here, looking at this matchup, we got Houston, Illinois. Um, Houston top 15 in offense and a top 5 in defense in the country. And Illinois is a top 2 team in the country in offense and a top 24 in defense. I think honestly, I think Illinois, their offense has kind of been overlooked so far this year. I don't think a lot of people have realized how good that offense is. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how it matches up with a really good Houston defense.
This is honestly a national championship game in the Sweet 16 with how powerful both these teams are. Um, Houston, obviously, ever the past few years, obviously been a favorite going into the tournament. Illinois, good basketball school, have had a lot of success in recent years as well, especially producing NBA talent. Um, this could like if they were on the opposite sides of the
Yeah,
bracket,
this would be a
I think a lot of people would have them meeting in the national championship. It's
yeah,
unfortunate that they meet in the Sweet 16, but it is fortunate that we get to watch these two teams play against each other.
100%. Um, Kind of the thing that stands out as a probably a turning point in this game is Illinois. They're top 35 in limiting shots at the rim, but they tend to force a lot of mid-range shots. However, that is exactly where Houston thrives. So it'll be interesting to see if Illinois kind of changes their defensive game plan to get rid of these mid-range shots, because Houston is, or not is, but they've made the most mid-range shots in the country. So obviously they're pretty good in that spot. So if they get forced into those looks, they're not going to be afraid to pull up and shoot. I think the thing that's standing out to me for Illinois is they're number 1 in the country in limiting free throws for the opposing offense. And I think
Hmm.
that's a huge stat, and especially in a tournament like this, kind of goes along the lines of free throw percentage. Obviously, you want to have guys that can make those tough shots under pressure, 1, 2 point games. They can nail those free throws. But defensively, if you got a squad that isn't giving up a lot of free throws, that's also a very good sign.
No, I agree.
I think this is a gosh. I mean, literally all these matchups are must watch for their own individual reason.
Yeah,
But we
if you
got
aren't watching every single game, you're doing life wrong, I think personally.
100%. I literally could not agree more. You got to have multiple screens or at least a quad box. You got to have something going. For this matchup, we got Arizona, Arkansas. John Calipari once again with a dominant guard. And Arizona, who's a top 5 team in offense and defense in the country, they've arguably been one of the best teams in the country. And I think for me, the thing with Arizona is they get basically majority of their points in the paint. They average about 42 points per game inside the paint. And I think that's also interesting because Arkansas allows shots at the rim at a 68% percentage. So having kind of those counteract, it's definitely going to be one has to give type of situation. Obviously, I think all of us are hoping and wanting Acuff to go off as usual. I think that's just an incredible storyline as the past 5 games have shown. To go along with his stats, he's also been 20 plus in 16 of the last 17 Acuff. So he's been very much a go-to guy, putting up at least 20 a game for the latter half of the season. So it'll be interesting to see how Arkansas's defense does with Arizona because Arizona's offense is so heavily based inside the paint and getting looks close to the rim there.
I think my quick thought on this game is how long does this Arkansas run last for? I mean, they've played the whole SEC tournament. Obviously, Arizona has been successful all year. Arkansas went into the SEC tournament at what, a 4 seed? I
Yeah, I
want to
believe so.
say.
Something like that.
Let me see real quick. They were a 3 seed, I believe. Yeah, 3 seed. So obviously not a top 5 team in the nation going into the tournament. Um, when does this run magically end? Are they going to be burnt out going into this game, especially after a tough high point game the weekend before? Um, I think Ar- looking at Arkansas, it's either I don't think they can make it to the Final Four anymore. I think this might be the game where Arizona ends it, and I think personally, I think it could be a blowout.
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility here. I think if Arkansas can find a way to beat Arizona, I think that is all signs pointing to a Final Four run. Obviously, they have another game, 2 days later, so hopefully they don't get burnt out too much. But I think if they could come up and beat a squad like Arizona, I think that is very good signs leading to a possible national championship. If I'm being quite honest. I think we got 3 matchups here left in the Sweet 16. We got Purdue, Texas. Obviously, 2 different kind of stories here. Purdue was pretty good in the beginning of the year, kind of collapsed halfway through, and since February, they've been per KenPom the top offense in the country since February. So they've been very good as of late, as we saw in the Big Ten tournament. But a team like Texas, they've been hot. They've been a first 4 team, so they've
They've
had
been
to
hot
play.
since the tournament started.
Yeah, they've had to play
They
quite a few
lost to
games
Ole
already.
Miss. They lost to Ole
Yeah,
Miss first round. That almost knocked them out of the tournament. They're lucky to be in it.
yeah, definitely. That was a bit of a grasp at straws there. But I think for me, the thing with Texas is they rely heavily on individual creation, and I think if Purdue's defense can shut that down, that's going to be, you know, probably the game changer for them. But
Mm.
obviously, this Texas squad has had tons of momentum since playing in that first 4 game.
Yeah. No, 100%. And momentum is what can get you to the Final Four in this tournament.
That's exactly what it gets you. That's all what it's about. We can kind of go into this one here. We got Michigan, Alabama. To be honest, I didn't think Alabama was going to make it this far.
I didn't
Flat
either.
out and say that. I think a lot of it had to do with the
Arrest
arrest and team suspension from for Holloway. But with Michigan State, I think the thing that stands out for me is
Michigan.
Michigan, my bad. The thing that stands out for me for Michigan is all three of their bigs work very well together, and I think that's very interesting because you don't see a lot of, especially college teams, play three bigs and play so well with three bigs.
I think Michigan's playing without pressure, especially after losing the Big Ten championship. I think they're looking at this now. They've got nothing to lose, and they're going in this tournament with one goal, which every team's one goal is to win a national championship. But I think Michigan has just played so freely the past two games.
Yeah, I mean, after that heartbreaking loss against Purdue, I think they've been able to, bounce back, maybe a good reset for them there. I think, looking at this last matchup here is, a side I also didn't think was going to make this far. They were able to beat Virginia there, but it is Iowa State versus Tennessee. And I think Iowa State's just going to run away with this here. Iowa State, even though they've dealt with that injury of their, almost, I think he was their star player in that first game, first couple of minutes, they've been able to do very well without him. And I think if they can continue um, to keep this, once again, it's all momentum based in March. So I think if they could keep it rolling, I think they're going to be able to topple Tennessee, no problem.
I think Tennessee's going to be the dark horse that possibly goes to the Final Four. I think Tennessee does beat. I think they surprised Iowa State in this matchup. I think a lot of people have their eyes turned away from Tennessee, and I think they ride the momentum and shock a lot of people in this tournament and challenge Michigan for a Final Four place.